Thank you very much, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Harrow Pension Fund Committee, and can I extend a special welcome to Jeremy Randall, who is joining us for the first time. Item 1, attendance by reserve members. I don't think we have any reserve members, do we? No, I think all 4 members of the committee are present. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to declare other than the ones that are already declared and are available on the website? Can't see any. Appointment of Vice Chair to the Pension Fund Committee for the municipal year 2021. We usually invite the Conservative members of the committee to appoint the Vice Chair. So do I have anybody put themselves forward?
I'd like to propose Councillor Thacker, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, I'll second that, and I'm sure we don't need to go to the vote, being such a small committee. So Councillor Thacker is appointed as the Vice Chair for the rest of this municipal year. Item 4, minutes to the meeting held on the 18th of December 2019, which seems to be an awful long way away. Can they be taken as read and signed as the correct record?
Chair, sorry, it's Dr. Gilani. There is an amendment to be made, which is included in your briefing note, and it relates to basically to delete everything after the first sentence in the 3rd bullet point on page 30 of the agenda. So if you look at minute 97, the paragraph on summary performance dashboard for period ended 30th of December, pages 9 to 10 of the main agenda, basically to delete everything after the first sentence in the 3rd bullet point. Is that agreed by the committee?
All right, could you just say that again? We're on page 9 or 10.
Yeah, it's pages 9. Look at page 9, and it's basically to delete everything after the first sentence in the 3rd bullet point under summary performance dashboard for period ended 30th of September.
So is that just the one bullet point that says concern was expressed about underperformance by some fund managers to a given benchmark? All the way,
yes.
Just that one bullet point?
Yeah, so we just leave that one bullet point and delete the rest.
Okay. So, with that amendment, are the members of the committee happy that I can sign them at some future date as a correct record?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yes. Right. So, we have no public questions under item 5. No public petitions, no deputations under item 7, and if we could move on to the item 8, the London Borough of Harrow Pension Fund draft annual report, external audit plan and financial statements for the year ending 31st of March 2020. Who is going to present that?
I think it's me, Chair.
Okay. Carry on.
Yeah, if that's okay, Chair. Jeremy will take us through it.
Yep.
Hopefully everyone can hear me. Yeah, this is something that you would normally have at this time of the year. You've got the draft annual report in front of you this evening. This is subject to audit, and the actual field work on the audit hasn't been completed yet. But at this point, I'm not aware of any changes. Although, you know, I say that cautiously because, as I say, they haven't completed their field work yet. Mazars. The outcome of the audit will be reported initially to the Governance Audit and Risk Management Committee on the 22nd of October, and it will come back to the November committee, November meeting of this committee. The report will then have to be published in its final form by the 1st of December, and that's the only date that hasn't been changed in this year's reporting cycle as a result of the pandemic. The report's in the required format that and complies with the guidelines, and it summarises the work that's been done on the various aspects of the fund in the course of the year. The fund membership has remained fairly stable. The number of active members has increased by 10, the number of deferred members by 70, and the number of pensioners by about 200. These are small movements in the context of the size of the fund. The council remains the biggest employer, accounting for nearly 82.5% of the fund. And there are obviously there are 39 other employers, which are mostly educational bodies, the largest of which has 319 members. The fund's investment assets were valued at just under 776 million at the 31st of March, compared with 850 million at the same time last year. And in essence, that's a timing issue. The impact on the investment markets as a result of the pandemic was at its peak, because if you recall it, at the 31st of March, the global lockdowns had only just begun. And as we'll see later on in the performance and valuation report, there's been a recovery in the value of investments since then, and at the end of July they were standing at 877 million, but there's still considerable volatility in that, as we'll see. I think that'll do on this one, Chair, and I'll pass it back to you if I may.
Yes, thank you very much. Are there any questions? Norman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask questions. I don't know whether they're to Jeremy or to Dawn, but I'm something I always ask when I see this report. It's about the number of pensioners and the number of active members. So the number of pensioners has gone up by just over 8%. And the number of active members has gone down by just over 4%. I know there's some reference about potential implications on this, but how does that compare to previous years? There's a trend, because that trend, if we project forward, is going to cause a real problem, isn't it? It's page 17 of the report.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer, Jeremy, or?
If you start, Dawn. Yeah. Yes.
I mean, I can't remember the comparison to last year, Councillor Stevenson, so I would have to check.
Yeah.
But I think, I mean, your observation is correct in terms of that that we have got we have got a few people coming out of the pension fund, and we've got more mature people staying in the pension fund. So that, you know, we do have to be mindful that we are at risk of sort of less contributions coming in, but our liabilities going up. So you're right, it is an observation. I mean, it's not, the numbers are not as stark that they could be, but it is a correct observation that we'll have to keep our eye on. We can get the comparison to next year. It's a good point, actually. We maybe should have put that in. So that's a good point.
I just think that would be a useful thing year on year.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
Yeah, because the long-term liability is what it's really all about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. No, you're right, it is.
There is actually a table showing that tracks the movement of members over the last 4 years on page 22.
Right.
And I think that the numbers you quoted was the movement between 2017 and 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
In the last year, the thing was fairly stable. We actually grew by 10 active members.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Good.
I also just wanted to. It's an observation, but it's interesting. On page 26, the costs of running the scheme per member have actually fallen, and that seems to be due to the lower charging structure by us moving into the London SIP. So that's a real positive, because there's been quite a discussion about the effectiveness of the London SIP. Is it as simple as that? Is that the main reason for the fall in costs? It's on page 26, I think.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that's in the investment management expenses. That is, in essence, the benefit of those fee negotiations with the London Civ.
I mean, other costs have gone up, but because of moving to the London Civ, it has brought the overall cost down.
Yeah, one of the reasons the other costs have gone up is every 3 years we have to have the full actuarial valuation, and so we don't spread the cost of the actuaries' costs over the 3 years. There's always a spike in their bills in the year in which the work for the triennial valuation was done, and of course, so that was done during 2019-20. So that is the reason for that increase.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Chair. I think Councillor Gilligan wants to speak, and so does Richard Romain, I understand. Thank you. Councillor Ferry, your microphone is muted.
Dean's got his hand up. Okay, well, while that's sorted out, Bharat, you've got your hand up as well.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask a question. I just wanted to clarify as to whether I heard it correct. The fund valuation last year was around 850 million, and this year it fell to 776 odd million, and in July it went up to 877 million. Have I got the numbers right?
I believe you have.
Yeah, those numbers are correct.
So 76 million this year. When was it this year? Which month?
No, the second supplementary agenda, which relates to item 14 on the agenda, tracks the month-by-month movement since March. But it's essentially there was a significant fall in the values of assets across the range of asset classes. It was simply the volatility in the markets around the time that global lockdowns were being implemented. It just happened that the accounts for the end of the year happened to fall at the 31st of March, which was 3 or 4 weeks, depending on which part of Europe you were in, for example, since the lockdowns were declared. So that was a very precarious time for the markets. There has been some recovery in the sort of period to the end of July.
And have you been active during this period in terms of management?
The managers will have been active. We haven't made any significant realignments of our assets other than the one that was agreed by the committee to fund a drawdown in respect of the London Civ Infrastructure Fund.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Right, I've got a question here from Richard. He's saying on page 17, benefit payments exceed contributions. This conflicts with page 33, which refers to a positive cash flow under liquidity risk.
Okay. Are you able to respond to that, Jeremy? Or do we need to get back to Councillor Romain? You're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, Dawn. I realise that.
Don't worry.
I struggle with the juggling the camera and the microphone. Yeah, I think the reason for that is that there were some significant transfers out in the last year. Normally transfers in and out you'd expect over time to be broadly similar. There were some significant transfers out of the fund in 2019-20, and I think that accounts for the that's why we'd say that generally we're just about cash positive. And of course there are other income streams as well. I think we are reaching a point where we're not as cash positive as we once were. I think it is certainly fair to say that.
And there's another question from Richard. He says on page 16, who determines the benchmark?
Page 16. Sorry, I'm looking for the.
So it's the benchmark, Jeremy, for the Harrow annual return performance.
Right. Yes. Yeah. That one. That's the that essentially is it's a benchmark that's calculated by PERC, but in essence it's a weighted average of the targets that each investment manager is set under their investment strategy. So each of the funds underlying investments in the fund has a target return, and PERC do a computation to calculate a weighted average of that, and that's the figure that's used as the fund benchmark in that calculation. It's just a means of comparing the Harrow fund against the rest of the local authority universe.
Dean, are you in contact with us? You there, Dean?
Councillor Ferry, he is online.
He is. I can't see or hear him other than a little circle at the bottom.
Councillor Ferry, I think he's having problems with his device. If you just give me a second, I'm going to ask him if you can dial in so we can hear him.
Okay.
So,
Well, Dean's come up with a question. He says, do we have a breakdown of those who have been made redundant in schools and corporately?
if that's just redundancy in general, we can get that information from HR counsellor. I must admit I need to check whether we've got that information from schools, but we could get that information from HR. If that's requested.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Could I just ask the councillor to clarify which year he would like it for?
I would think over the last 3 years or so.
Okay.
But the redundancy payments don't come out the pension fund, do they?
No, they don't. The redundancy payments are funded, and redundancy payments are funded by the council. The only thing that would come from the pension scheme is the pension liabilities.
Yeah. Okay. Are we all done on this item? So, can I just ask the committee to note the report? And if we move on to item 9, the annual review of internal controls at investment managers. I think that's you again, Jeremy, isn't it?
Indeed it is, Chair. I'll be even briefer on this one. Hopefully, it is best practice for all pension funds to receive annual reports, providing some assurance that the various managers who are overseeing the investments have got appropriate controls in place, that these controls are being followed, and where any issues have been identified, that the management within the organisation has taken prompt and appropriate action to rectify the situation. A summary of each of the reports from the various fund managers is included in this report, and details of their respective auditors' conclusions are shown in the Part 2 annex, together with details of the exceptions that were discovered in the courses of those audits. I just point out, at risk of telling my grandmother how to suck eggs, I'll point out that if you want to discuss any of those exceptions, we'd have to go into Part 2. The other thing to say is that the London CIV has provided details of the reviews that they've obtained for the various managers of the funds that they look after, and there are no unresolved issues to report with any of the managers, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. So we have to confine ourselves to any items that are on page 85 to 90 of the Part 1 agenda. Are there any comments? Don't see any. Okay, can we then just note that report and move on to the annual review of internal? Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Look, I think my question was slightly misconstrued as well. And the reason I asked that was because of the deficits that we spoke about earlier. You know, going forward, I certainly know that schools are restructuring and more people will come out of the fund. And I did think I heard that we've got 300 odd people in the fund from schools. And that's why I wanted that. I understand that breakdown purely on redundancy, with schools that are restructuring and therefore more people will leave the fund in that regard, and those corporately with 800 people in there corporately, and the impacts of those redundancies and cuts that we're facing on the fund. That is what I was trying to allude to and get to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I suppose the answer to that is that if somebody is made redundant and they continue on in local government, then their benefits transfer to whoever they've joined. If they are made redundant and take early retirement, then the benefits will be paid out of our fund. Isn't that right, Dawn?
Yeah, if you have the option, if you're made redundant, you don't necessarily have to exit the fund. You can just stop your contributions. And like you say, if you do move to another job, you have the option to transfer your pension to your other local government or health pension scheme.
Yeah.
So it would be quite difficult.
My point being is that those that are being made redundant invariably are of an age that they will then tap straight into their pension and possibly not get another job. I know that through the work that I do, and that is why I wanted that breakdown. If we're talking about people losing people and going forward, and I can see a horror story going forward of people taking redundancy, or how we operate as an organisation in the VR situation, and those that are being made redundant, and all are at an age that they seem to be taking their pension, and therefore that then diminishes our pot, doesn't it?
I think the Chair, if I can make one comment in the context of the pension fund, which is what we're discussing tonight, rather than the council's budget, which Dawn is better placed than me to talk about. The pension, if somebody retires as a result of redundancy and is able to draw their pension, then if they take that pension early, the employer has to contribute the pension strain costs into the fund. The the actuary there's an actuarial formula for calculating the impact on the fund of pensions paid earlier than was expected. And that essentially that calculation covers three elements. It covers the loss of contributions to the fund, the fact that pensions are being paid out early, and also an estimate of the investment return that would have been earned on those monies if we hadn't already paid them out. So the fund should not be in a placed in a worse position as a result of those early retirements. However, there is an impact on the organisation, the employing organisation.
Yeah, I certainly get that, and it was that breakdown that I wanted to know about on going forward on that. Not as regards to paying the actuaries and everything else like that, but going forward on that. If what I believe I heard, was that the fund has gone down from last year, and I want to pinpoint as to why and what remedies we can put into place apart from recruiting new people, of course.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Yeah. This is so difficult. Okay. All right.
Okay. Right. Are there any other comments? So can we then note item 9, the annual review of internal controls at investment managers? Yeah, I don't see any dissenters. So we move on to item 10, Pension Fund Committee Performance Dashboard and Update on Regular Items, pages 91 to 106.
Yeah, this is me again, Chair. This is the report that the committee gets regularly. There are a couple of things that I'd like to draw your attention to. The first thing is we've set out a draft work programme covering the meetings that are in the calendar until the end of March. And there's one particular thing that we wanted to as a bit of a steer on. In the when you previously looked at this, there was a suggestion that there would possibly be a meet the managers day at some point in between this meeting and the next one. But in view of the fact that we need to make some progress on the investment strategy review, we wondered whether actually the time that's in October and November may be put to better use by having some working groups to progress the investment strategy work streams. And so I just raised that one now. I think possibly we may need to come back to that when we look at the investment strategy review later in part 2 of the agenda and the way forward. But that is just to highlight that in the context of the work programme, we'd like the committee's view on that one. The performance dashboard has been produced by Aon, and that summarises the fund's position and managers' performance as at the 30th of June. You've also got the trigger monitoring report, which Aon and myself have had some discussions on this report, and the change in the actuaries methodology means that to some extent the methodology that we use in the trigger report has become slightly out of date. So we're suggesting that actually we don't bring this one or an updated version of that one to future meetings. The PERC reports, which compare the fund's performance to the other local authority funds, are also enclosed, and in the exempt annex, Aon's manager monitoring summary is enclosed. The final thing we've sent to you is the summary of the fund's investment valuation at the 31st of July, and that was the updated sheet that came round in the second supplementary agenda. It's just a single page. And as I said earlier, that highlights that the fund's value has gone up since the 31st of March from 777 to 877 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. Is there any comments on that? Can't see anybody putting their hand up. If you want to make a comment, just come off mute and shout.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could just ask a quick question.
Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, yeah, Jeremy, I'm sorry, are you asking us to make a decision at this moment in time as to whether we're going to have a Meet the Managers Day, or did you say that was going to be later on the agenda?
I thought if we could think about that in the context of what's proposed for the investment strategy review, and make a decision at that point in the meeting as to whether the work that's proposed for the investment strategy review would actually be a better use of the time that we have together, rather than having a Meet the Current Managers Day.
All right, thank you. That's fine.
Right, can't see any other hands up.
We've got a couple of questions from Councillor Amin, Councillor Ferry.
Yeah, I thought we'd do that under any other business.
All right, okay.
Doesn't apply to this exactly.
Okay,
So,
lovely, thank you.
Can the committee approve the recommendation on page 92 of the agenda? And that recommendation is that, subject to any comments the committee wish to make, the work programme for the period to March 2021 be agreed. Committee are invited to comment on the performance and investment dashboard report and preferred format and presentation for future reports. Of course, this is going to be talked about under part 2 later on. But we're happy with the work plan until March 2021, I hope. Can't see anybody dissenting. Right, so if we move on to Richard's remarks on training, what training is proposed, because we used to have a training session before each meeting, and sandwiches as well. So I don't think we can have a virtual sandwich, but are we going to move back to trying to have a training session before?
I mean, we can. I mean, I can understand. We can certainly do that. That's not a problem. And we would try and gear that training to what people felt was the most appropriate. So we would having the training session is fine, and I think we'd welcome the committee's sort of help with what they would like to receive training on. Yeah.
Well, perhaps if members of the Norman.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, I mean, it was important to have training. The fact that COVID has come along hasn't changed that, so I think it's a must. We've got to go back to that, in my view.
Yep. Okay.
So shall we? So shall Jeremy? So we've got training sessions booked on the next 2 meetings. Shall Jeremy be in contact with the committee in terms of ideas for training and get some agreement on the next 2 training sessions?
All members of the committee can contact Jeremy if they could think of a particular item.
Thank you.
One thing that has carried over from previous committees is that we would like to see somebody from the London Civ when they get themselves sorted out. Now, I don't think we decided really whether that would be during the committee meeting or whether it would be a pre-meeting. I think probably to start off with, it would be useful to have a pre-meeting as a training session for the London Civ and to ask them questions. I did attend the London Civ AGM virtually, and I think there are a few questions to be asked of them, but they've had a change round in staff, and a lot of the staff that were present at the London Civ AGM hadn't been in post long enough to really answer the questions. So my suggestion would be for the next pension fund committee, if we can get somebody from the London Civ to come along, not to answer detailed questions about investments, but you know, how the London Civ is organised and how it's getting on.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Jeremy can arrange that.
We don't have to wait for the investment manager. I mean, somebody else, the CEO might come along. He's been there a bit longer than the chief investment officer. So looking at what Richard has put here, he says, are we planning to review the risk register relating to item 10 on the agenda?
Yeah, didn't we have that on there, Jeremy? Because we do need to review the risk register, because I think it's been a couple of years since it's been done, hasn't it? So we can include that if that's omitted, because I do think the risk register hasn't been reviewed for a good year, so we can put that on. We can put that on one of the future sessions.
Yeah, that I actually put that on the list for the next meeting. I described it as on page 92 on the 4th bullet point for the 25th of November. I described it as emerging risks, including review a risk register.
Lovely. So it's on there for next time.
I thought I'd put it on. Obviously,
Lovely.
yeah. Well.
That's great. Thank you. So we'll be reviewing that next time.
Yep.
Thank
you. I'm flicking between about 4 screens at the moment, so bear with me. I think that's all of the items in the part 1. So we now have to log off and come back under part 2, don't we?